Good afternoon, everyone. This is Amol from Microfocus Marketing Team, your host for this webinar. On behalf of Microfocus and QualityKiosk, I welcome you all for the CXO Roundtable on Performance Engineering 2.0. You are all logged in listen-only mode. This is a 1 hour long webinar. You can communicate through the chat function only. We thank you for joining us. The session will be moderated by Amin, EVP Managing Digital Transformation in QualityKiosk. We have our guest speakers include Mr. Vivek Dhavale, Deputy CTO, Equitas, Mr. Rohit Rajwar, Head of Performance COE, Geo, Mr. Gaurav Sharma, CTO, LTFS, Mr. Bharat Goyal, Performance Architect, Sapient, and also we have Mr. Manish Gupta, Business Consulting Lead, Microfocus. Over to you, Amit.
Yeah, thanks, Amol. Am I audible now?
Yes, Amit.
Yeah, I had to use my special sign language. I don't know. So thanks for understanding. So welcome, everyone. I really appreciate at a professional and a personal level for you to give your time, especially as a panelist and also as an audience member. I at outset, I want to actually, preempt the kind of, anxieties we are all experiencing due to the obvious environment that we are living in. But very honestly, I think that was the premise to set up this agenda also, because all of us now for the past 1 year are sort of living a digital twin life, right? Talked about digital twin as a concept, but now our digital touch points are very apparent, very frequent, and very critical now. And the performance engineering architecture that supports is fundamental to this scaling and being sustainable. And that is why we approached our partner. We are also a partner to our clients, and we wanted them to come in. And we have great esteemed panelists. You have actual practitioners, including head of COE like Rohit, a performance architect. Mr. Vivek himself is a developer and has had a core understanding of the operation system. Gaurav is a out and out CXO, but also he has been at the core of IT ops innovation. And Bharat also comes in with that background. And Manish, of course, is going to lend credibility as an OEM, a technology enabler for the kind of performance architecture we talk about. So with that, I'd like to start off. I'll give you a basic rundown of our flow. We are going to actually rotate, certain, ideas or discussion points with our panelists. I'd like to call them not questions. And then we are also going to go back to the audience, right? So for us, your interactions are actually, if not more important. So we have some polls for you. We will queue it, just 3 of them, but we'd like to hear your results, and hopefully Amol can announce it so that actually it may influence the discussion, but at the least it may give us some input on what are the audience thinking. And of course we will have definitely a Q&A. We have some questions. Yes, we have I think 3 questions already lined up from the audiences that we have received. But yes, we have an active chat. Please do drop in your questions. We have some SMEs also sitting there. They will try to answer and probably come back to me if you can ask it to the panelist. So with that, as I said, the entire idea behind what we are going through is around the theme of how are we coping, right, as individuals. And the fact that we are able to right now sustain ourselves in some manner is, I think, a great achievement in any case. But I'd like to actually ask the panelists, and I'd probably start with Gaurav, with you. You're a veteran. You have seen various life cycles, right, of technology and business. How is your business coping, and what do you see right now as a general input that you see is picking up as a trend, or any other learning or experience?
Right. Thanks, Amit. So, Amit, we are already more than a year into this pandemic, and I guess all of us are learning, how to cope with it and find the new normal. Few things from our business, sort of, which I want to point out here is that initially the first reaction was how we can have more and more digital touch points. with our customers, simply because a large part of our customer base is still rural, who wasn't that comfortable, and we still had a lot of collections which were in terms of cash and all. So that was the first reaction which the business generated, is that how we can move to, even for the rural segment, move to a digital sort of collection, and the percentages have improved. The second thing is that credit history of a lot of our customers has really got broken, given the government regulation, interventions, moratorium, one-time restructuring, and hence further customer acquisition has been tricky, right? One is not able to adequately judge the credit rating, and hence one of the other pivots which we have made is more of a cross-sell and upsell. So instead of acquiring new customers more, the emphasis is on doing more with the current customer base. And essentially that has meant that we have also developed a new product, which is a consumer loan, which is more like a fungible product, can fit in to any customer base. And we have tried to sort of, increase the share of wallet versus go for new customers. So these are two things which come to my mind immediately. Of course, all of us are learning how to work from home, how to work remotely, and finding efficiency in that. So yeah, so
Yeah, so
hoping this sort of gets over soon. Yeah.
yeah, I really found it interesting that you are actually doubling down on your existing penetration on the digital touch points. Vivek, in your organization as a financial technology company, I'm sure you're also in the similar space. Do you see anything similar happening, or is it something which is more native to products you're developing at Equitas?
Yeah, so it is pretty much similar. So because of this pandemic, definitely there is a need to do go digital as much as possible. Avoid agents in the field, or at least if they are in branch, then try to have a contactless impact. So we started with a project called as selfie account opening, where the customer by themselves can do account opening with a half KYC, and then with some documentation we convert to a full KYC. So that way we try to ensure that in going digital, by which uh, customers are contactless, and still we can keep onboarding customers. So initiatives are on similar lines.
Okay,
Second is,
and
of course, things like
yeah.
connecting with fintechs and other DSs, etc. Because some of those fintechs who are already having, in fact, I don't know if you have seen yesterday's Economic Times. In some states, we had a front page ad on similar lines. Again, mobile-based customer acquisition and account maintenance, etc. That is again complete digital initiative.
Yeah, so I just wanted to just follow up quickly on the digital KYC, because at QualityKiosk, it's been definitely not a thematic. It's been actually an ask tangibly that has to be sustainably delivered, and from an operational perspective, but at a business conversion perspective in terms of onboarding customers, it's a critical drop off.
Yes.
So Bharat, you are in a space which is kind of aligned on the enterprise side at Publicis Sapient. What are your parallels that you see, or maybe something different that is coping up in your industry?
Yeah, as rightly Gaurav said, and Vivek, shared his comments. We are in a digital transformation space where we were working from last, couple of decades in helping the clients to make their transformation from a, offline mode to online mode. So it's kind of situation that we are in from last 1 year. The requirement is to move to the online mode. So that digital transformation strategy that our organization took place over the course of 2 decades, that helped a lot in this last 1 year for the clients. And there are few clients for us which actually increased in their revenue because they were in the space of retail industry, grocery, and there are clients, but it's not that situation is not that rosy for all the clients. There are few clients which are struggling to get get their products sold out because they are luxury. So people are not affording this particular products. So what we are helping with them is like to increase the in terms of innovation that we are taking place. For one of the client, what we are trying to see is that when we were not going in an online offline online mode from the last it's like 2 decades, that has increased in demand of having such kind of innovation in place. So there were few initiatives were there in our organization which actually creating kind of opportunities for us, and increasing in terms of like sustaining with the revenue as well. So but it's not that this is the only thing. There are multiple things where we have to constantly in touch with the
Right.
client and then their requirements.
Yeah, makes sense. I think that is definitely one trend which is converging across, banking, financial services, and enterprise business. So Manish, you actually serve these clients, right? So from a perspective of enabling them with technology, anything that you see as picking up as a bigger theme or something that you feel you are struggling now with more?
Yeah, sure, Amit. In fact, I was listening when I was listening to Bharat. This is what crossed my mind as well. That it's a mixed bag. I think, and yesterday I think you might have read in the newspaper as well that the digital divide is seems to be increasing, and this is something we are seeing that there are clear, people who are quite ahead in their digital transformation journey, and they seem to be also very mature on their DevOps practices. And then I think there were people who had not transformed as much, and their DevOps practices and even performance engineering and all those practices seem to be lagging, in the same proportion. But having said that, I think this is what seems to be the consensus, that the digital transformation is here. I think everybody is serious about it. But one of the things I might want to add to it, what we have seen from our business perspective is the move to the cloud. I think a lot of more mission critical workloads are moving to the cloud now. And as a technology provider for, say, performance engineering solutions, a lot of our performance engineering business is also moving to the cloud. We have more customers who quickly want to assess how the application is going to perform, or sometimes, you're just setting up a new application, a new digital estate, and you just don't know how it is going to behave. Or sometimes if you're moving an ERP from on-prem to the cloud, because I think almost, a lot of, rather, I would say, SAP and Oracle customers have their migrations planned already because of the version upgrades or any transformation
Yeah.
that is going on. Some of those workloads are not directly going to the cloud, and that's also something that we have seen as a technology provider.
Yeah, I think that's something we mirror, and definitely I think we see that shaping up in a more tangible manner with the clients who are now more certain rather than being uncertain about cloud workloads. Rohit, if there is one thing which is certain is that there has never been a BAU for Geo. The last 3 years, I think the entire country is tracking, how your Geo platforms maybe or your specific, client-centric apps are scaling. What's your take? How do you see this shaping out? Because I'm sure you guys are, completely full steam ahead. Rohit, am I audible to you?
Yeah. So I'm like, I think the first thing that I'll put up is like, let's see the journey. I'm like, when we talk about like where we are, how we are trying to reshape, right? The first thing that we need to talk about is like the digitization itself. It's not that we have had it for like say century old or practice or something. It's just, I mean, like, to be honest, smartphones is like just a life of a decade since when it started. And when we talk about all these, the important thing that comes into mind is like how do we live with it, because the demand of the market is to digitize thing and live with it forever. And that's where I think like especially with all these strategies coming into places, and then there is a decode of like public shamming that is actually coming in place. Amazon and players who are actually trying to de-rank the instruments which are not performing well. So it just means that I'm like performance is kind of the demand. I'm like, and it doesn't matter. I'm like to be honest, to honest reply to everyone who's actually around says digital banking and all. The first thing that we have to keep in mind is like the technology itself is kind of threat to all these businesses. I rather quote it like technology, whether technology is competition or a threat. And the second thing is definitely legacy means downfall. So if we talk all of it, right? Why we say technology and why we say banking in two different phases? Reason being, I could have an old banking system, like say, for example, Axis or something, which someone which are trying to portray their weapons in terms of the digital formats and all. But there could be technology companies like Google who can come up with similar practices, and they would be able to deliver it in a better way because they know the technology in and out, right? In that case, they can actually outbeat the real giants of banking system, which is kind of the game that we are in the world right now. And that's where we always say that if we have to, if you're talking about say banking, and if you're talking about the digital systems, the important thing is to basically tie everything around technology, because in this world it does not matter who has the first idea. The moment you put out the product, the idea is afoot. And now it's a matter of who comes with the right set of architecture and right set of implementation to take it to the coverage of entire population. So I think it's about being the best rather than being the first of its kind, right?
I completely, I think, agree on that. And I think, please.
And I think I'm like some of the facts are very, very true. That I'm like, I think anybody who's a business organ or a business analyst and would talk about like settling up things, he would say that yes, a lot of customers tend to walk out of platform because of the performance. And similarly, with respect to the design itself, because we all understand that digital system works it works in a very complex manner, and the only way to resolve the complexity is by having the by keeping ahead in terms of technology and building something that may look technical but would be actually a business need at the end of the day. So that's basically my take in terms of like realizing that yes, there is a definite threat, and I think the threat is good for the competence.
No, I think that's completely mirrored by some of the discussions we are having as QualityKiosk with our clients, where the shift has been from a project-led outcome engineering to a more fundamental engineering now to be built, which is sustainable, so that your quality engineering or your performance engineering practice is actually a competence, and it's not actually something that supports a competence. Right? So your ability to serve consistent experiences becomes a product, and of course, then you can add layers of products or services on top of it. So I think that's very interesting. And another point I'll just add is I see a lot of behavioral reinvention happening with people, where there are now clients who see clear identity of their customers being more efficient if they're on digital, right? If you look at your neighbor and the person in your close vicinity, you would like to be more efficient, right, in whatever you do, whether it's ordering things or doing payments or completing some transactions. And people have kind of taken that up. So I think clients or companies are looking to take advantage of that more ready or self-adoption. And that's actually forcing them to now scale in a very different manner for performance outcomes. I'll segue quickly. We promised opinion polls. So Amol, I'm queuing you for the first poll. This is the first poll. I hope you have it. You can please present it. Does your organization, this is to the audience, very simple, options to you to answer to the question, does your organization have clear digital performance management goals? Question is simple, but I have to answer actually. But you can give a yes if you have everything in black and white, a no if you're honest, and then of course a lot of people have it in the works. So we'd like to hear your results in the opinion poll. I'll give it a 25-second timer, and then we can publish the results. So you have to go towards your right on the menu and select the poll option. But I think the pop-up would have been there, right, Amol?
The pop-up is there already there.
Yeah, the poll is on the screen, Amit.
Nice. So please do give your frank and quick opinion. I think if we can present it to the panelists as a trend, at least, if you all are not able to submit, it'll be great. Yeah, Amol, I'm good. I think we can probably just announce the current results. What is the trend?
So yes, so the trends are
Yeah, 54% said
54% has
yes.
said yes,
Oh, wow.
17% has said no, while 29% has said in the works.
Nice. I think this is a very prepared audience, right? So I think you're confident, and I think that's great. I think the question actually was really to talk about that you are right now having goals around digital performance, which are very clearly at an organization level being vocalized. I think that's more important. So really happy to see that. I think all the panelists will also be very happy to see that. Moving on to the next question, and I just wanted to, put this up as a kind of a follow-on. So now we have our experience in terms of what's happened in the past 1 year, and we are trying to kind of structure the version 2.0, so to speak, of performance architecture for the next few years. And I think that's the only visibility we have. How do you scale it? Because one thing is apparent, right? Despite your product and your engineering, there is going to be a scale that will actually demand a performance. So organization which will be scaling smartly, that's one thing. But the other perspective is that how do you give a consistent experience? I think with the recent events that we have had with some outages in the past year also, one thing is very clear. Largest organizations are struggling with consistency of delivering experience. So Gaurav, actually, I'd like to start with you on this, and then I'll go to the other panelists. In fact, Vivek, you can also come in on this. How are you seeing this play out?
Yeah, so let me go in first, then Vivek, I'm sure we'll have sort of similar things. See, large part of IT delivery per se, till some point in time was around ensuring availability. So if in case there was a new product to be launched or new variant to be launched, one wanted to be quick and time to market, and essentially wanted to provide a reliable experience. Now, really, what's happened is that a customer experience aspect of it is probably far more important, because that itself is the product in a lot of ways. So essentially, to your question, that so for example, let me just pick up the case in point. We recently launched a consumer loan product, right? And it is it's available directly to the customer as well as an assisted channel. And yes, the way we prepare for it is that we have some kind of a performance model of our internal systems to say we have calibrated, what kind of threshold or throughput we can support across the various, aspects of our delivery point, and we calibrated that to say what kind of load we are expecting. So that is one level of preparation, and appropriately, we keep doing that in line with our business cycles. So, for example, around month ends and all. So that is one. Second is purely on the customer experience side of it, is that we did some bit of, if I could say, alpha and beta testing prior to the customer launch to figure out is the experience in line. So the short answer is it is not just about being available when the business wants it. It is also to be able to provide the right experience either directly to the customer or in purely in terms of fulfillment at the back end.
Any architectural decisions you had to take for not the apparent but the obvious future scalability in mind while you were deploying these things? Anything that you took as a decision which will help you scale better?
So one of the things, and I don't know if it directly addresses your question, is that we realize that while we are digital, there is still a lot of document flow which happens in case of customer acquisition, right? And hence, and the thing about document is that whichever way you capture it, whether it is entered or it is OCR and all, it's a heavy payload, right? And essentially that a lot of times becomes a bottleneck in terms of how do you store it, how does it go through the network, and how do you sort of ensure that the transaction throughput. So one of the decisions we took is that our document management system, our DMS, which there is, how do we ensure that has sufficient redundancy and has sufficient, if I could say, cushion and the least amount of latency to be able to support that. That is something which comes to my mind on the top, simply because that has been the biggest bottleneck.
I think that's a fair point. It's a very practical point, because you have to first, ease out the bottlenecks, right? Because those are the ones which are going to apparently be a hindrance. And then I think a lot of the modeling happens over time also on how you actually really scale. Vivek, any perspective you saw that you deployed as a strategy specifically at Equitas, which is going to give you more assurance on performance?
So even before we talk about customer experience and digital, I'm sure a whole lot of audience and some panelists here would agree that whatever said and done, you keep hearing from business users saying, no, we want to do business, but systems were not performing. So the point I'm trying to make is, even before we talk digital and new stuff, some of the base systems itself have to be little rugged and performance oriented or tuned, so that because finally n number of channels, digital, web, DSS, they'll come into, and there will be a core system which will anyway get impacted. So my point is to first get some of this base ready, and hence, and even much before pandemic, what we tried to do was do something called as an annual review of performance. And it is not necessarily because of digital or something. Even without digital, when the business says I'm going to do 15% year on year, even then it does mean that the way at which the storage will increase or the number of transactions will increase, you have to make sure the performance SLAs or the TATs or the response times are good. So one of the intended thing that we do was to do an annual, and that time it was with QualityKiosk, I can say, and we got a team from them, and every system, almost every month we took up one system and made sure in an end-to-end way we could do performance. End-to-end, I meant including the interfaces, including from the end user to the interface and back. The response times are measured, concurrency of users is checked, and then we could sort of say, yes, with this we can definitely go up to next 9 months or 1 year. So to me, I think that base has to be.
Yeah, I think the hygiene is paramount. And some discussion is also on to change the hygiene onto a different deployment. But Rohit, we work with you, and one of the things I have to say, and I have to ask you, is that I think Geo is not about planning to scale. Geo is scale, right? So, and specifically, I've seen you working on some very interesting things, and we've got to hear about. And you're yourself an SRE practitioner, right, by background. What's your take on this? Because I think you are fundamentally built for scale, which I think gives you a competence itself. And is there something that you're doing uniquely, if you can tell to us?
Sorry, I'll keep my point as comment to the question that is made out here for the customer experience, right? And what we're doing in terms of scaling.
Sure.
So me, right? I mean, like for me, I never say PE. I always say PSR, because for me, it doesn't matter whether it is performance or engineering. It's not a methodology. It's not a practice or anything. It's just a psychology to think through performance, scalability, and reliability. That's why I always call it PSR. That's the first objectivity. And when we talk about performance, scalability, and reliability, the first thing that I always think about scaling is like our own intelligence and our own skill. So I always believe that PE or PSR can be part of any cycle of the SDLC. Starting from requirement analysis, we can have a nice session going on with the business folks to understand what the strategy is about and what are the volumes that we are trying to sense. What is the outrage that we are going to make in terms of disrupting, right? And whether we are meeting the right numbers or whether we are able to even draw what we are expecting out of it in terms of the non-functional requirements. And the second thing that I always do is like, it's kind of like be at the top of architecture. Because for me, I mean, like if we just look at the architecture and we look at design, because any software architecture is basically part of two things. One is the architectural pattern, and the second thing is the system design, right? And all I do is basically look at that blueprint, even if it needs thousands of times look, I do that just to understand that system is whatever we are building is neither of memory bound, CPU bound, or IO or FD bound, which gives us a space. Yes, whatever we are trying to assess through the design and whatever the developers would be working on is bound to seamlessly scale horizontally. So the one factor that we have to keep a very kind look at it is like everything should be loosely coupled, which is again a practice that can be talked through in terms of solution as well as technical architecture as well. And apart from that, a few other things, how we are going about our DR resiliency, right? And that is where I think I have borrowed some of the strategies working with few folks at Google as well. And
Right.
the active mechanism. I think a lot of people in this world actually talk about like it's wonderful to have active say top-notch data centers and all. But I think at times we have to also realize that while doing the review of our architecture and the tools and the say software that we are choosing might not be right for that setup. So it's already a lost game, right? We have already been through uh, all these time developing all these, and at the end of the day, we realize that we cannot have this essence of like active act, right?
Yeah.
Think of
Yeah.
it how Uber does. Uber does it beautifully, and like it just manages it on the fly. And I think that is the key. If we know that our architecture can scale without any foundation, and our data is seamless in terms of extraction and say filleting, then I think we have done a wonderful job. And a few of the practices I think, can be part of it, like why sharding, why not to think about say uh, nothing shared architecture or shared nothing architecture, right? So these are the fundamentals that actually help you very early on talking about performance engineering or PSR, because I think
Yeah.
performance engineering is nothing like whatever we have built and we are testing and trying to tune it. I think performance tuning is the easiest job that you can do, and the toughest
Right.
job is to find the problems which are related to design, because that is finally what is what is going to allow you to scale. And having said that, I mean, and you have worked with me, right? One of the things
Yeah.
that I always do, like, I don't take a system where I run it by and I think of tuning it in terms of whatever technology stack is there. What I basically do is like I take the technology, I run the benchmarks in a separate COE just to figure it out what are the best practices for those technologies, so that when I find that technology integrated with particular say journey, I already know the best practices, so that
Right.
I'm not running through the iteration of say testing and finding it out, because I think
Yeah.
best practices are the biggest forte for any performance engineering team. If you can pull
No,
it out of the if you can pull it out of the pocket, then you're a magician, right? And
yeah,
that's
and in fact, I just want to extend and add on to that quickly if I can, and we'll move on. One of the things that I definitely QualityKiosk gets asked about is that with our 2 decades of experience, help us with relative performance benchmarking, right? Because all performance is relative and it's all iterative in terms of how your systems get deployed at a certain stagger. So I just wanted to say that we see that practically happening in our projects, where what platform we provide for performance engineering, they are embedded with the domain libraries or libraries around performance life cycles, whether a microservices architecture or a cloud-centric deployment. I think clients really are now smartening up, and you're actually completely in sync. What we are seeing also happening, they're not looking for absolute benchmarks now. They're looking at relative benchmarks to an application deployed in a certain environment for a certain customer, right? Like I think Gaurav was mentioning, the tier 2 customers. So it's absolutely a separate model of performance. So very well actually put and articulated. That actually brings out the next, the cause of discussion that I'd like to just start is, so if you're going to scale and you have a plan in place, you're going to need definite, game-changing decisions, right? So cloud is now not game-changing; it's a decision at par for most organizations. It's only that what stagger and what rhythm of cloud deployment you do and how you shift your workloads, right? And that equally syncs up with the other part of the story, which is the microservices deployment architecture and supporting API-led open app integrations. So Bharat, I'd like to just start with you, because as a technology stack owner yourself, right, you work with the clients. What are the things that you're seeing that clients are more clear about and are taking decisions actively around these decisions? And what are the impact of that, if any?
Yeah, so as you rightly said, cloud and the microservices are the new technologies which every client is targeting in a near future. If it's already not done it, otherwise the others are in progress, or there are few which are already done it, and the clients which are already done it, they are way ahead in the market, and then the digital marketing space and onboarding the customer much faster. So
Yeah.
I mean, if I talk about 5 years ago when we had this performance engineering practices, we did not have that clients, which were not aware, which are not too aware about the performance practices and the technology. And now, every client is onboarding people who are technologists in their specific domain, and they are making the
Right.
decisions. They are owning the end-to-end architecture, and they are reviewing actually, and they are pinpointing the gaps. If I talk about a recent application where and we had one of the one of the proposal from our application teams, like I would change this architecture to with the addition of a extra security layer, and the client was asking, it's good that you are giving me security, but what about the performance? And your
Overhead.
additional security layer on each API will give additional latency to to my end users. So it's not one API, on one page. There are multiple APIs on the page, and the backend is going to be impacted, and there will be a lot more cost involved. Yeah. So you need to find out some other alternatives. And in terms of performance practices, we talk about, earlier we used to just run browser level testing, just
Yeah.
record the test, and then business scenarios, and then go to your performance testing tool, and then get the report, analyze it, and then provide it. And it's not now the application are loosely coupled. They are into open architectures, the APIs, microservices. So you just have to instead of having the tested it as a whole, you have to do it individualistically. Like for each API, you need to find a benchmark, and then accordingly you need to act, and you need to find out the benchmark, the workload model, the the
Right.
right set of tools, and then you have to you give the recommendation.
So your case-to-case tuning is becoming a priority. So you have to
Yeah.
optimize more based on the scenario. So Manish, in fact, you have a robust cloud, the strategy to support performance workloads. And but I just wanted to understand from you: are you seeing clients deepening their bets, the ones who have already taken a decision on cloud or an open architecture like microservices? Or are you seeing the spread increasing where more clients are now coming in asking and demanding workload management on cloud?
Yeah, certainly more customers going to the cloud. I mentioned that earlier. But there is also another implication of this open architecture where people are relying more on, we're talking about fintechs, or even within the e-commerce space, you have a lot of players who are giving rise to this API-based economy. And today we are talking about a plug and play system. So you want to start a business, you can actually plug into a lot of these API. So that's a reality. But I think what's that all from a performance perspective, what it's doing is it's also opening up multiple points of failures. So while the business agility is going up because you now can start a business much faster, you can go online, but the number of points of failures are also increasing. So triaging performance issues is becoming more complex. I think that's where
Right.
expertise, where you guys like QualityKiosk bring in a lot of, multiple decades of experience, combined with what we are doing on a technology side is building our product for performance testing and engineering more sophisticated with analytics capabilities, right? Integrations with the leading APM tools, right? So, you talk about the top 3 APM tools in the market. Today, we have a seamless integration into our performance engineering platform, because when you are running your load simulations, when you are stressing the system with load, to identify which APIs are actually causing the problem, you need to integrate with an APM tool. And going back to your previous question, it's all about hygiene, right? There are two options. Either you go live and then you look at your APM tool and try to understand where it failed. But by that time, the ship has sailed, right? The customer's probably moved on to somebody else.
True.
So from a hygiene perspective, performance engineering, performance testing remains a critical priority, but adding key analytics capabilities and APM becomes very important. Number two, the second point I wanted to make here is, and this is a trend we are seeing a lot nowadays, especially in the banking sector, where you have these middlewares, and typical mid-sized to large-sized bank has almost 500 to 600 APIs hosted on that middleware, because just to enable, say, from your mobile banking, a seamless omni-channel experience to request a loan, you're touching a few dozen services already. And testing those environments is becoming very expensive because you have to set up each component to production scale. You also need to make sure that these environments are available. Sometimes testing teams are just waiting. So we are actually seeing a lot of customers coming to us demanding these service virtualization capabilities, which started in business about 10, 15 years back. But suddenly, with this API movement, we're seeing more emphasis, especially in the larger enterprises, to have some kind of a service virtualization solution which can ease that pain, make testing more cost-effective and fast.
No, absolutely. I think I recognize. I think those.
Sorry, Amit.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to share one very recent discussion that we had with one of the fintechs, and it is very much relevant to the question. So, we wanted to partner with them so that they can open some accounts for us. And so we have this API gateway. We exposed some APIs, and we said, it is ready. We are ready. You just have to do. So then we started discussing numbers. So we said we are expecting around 1 billion a year. So they did calculations and say, which means roughly 3,000 a day, and if it is 3,000 a day, so reducing dropouts, etc. We want an SLA from you of a turnaround time or a response time of 3 seconds, not more than 3 seconds. Then we will definitely meet. So that is the impact of having open apps or open banking APIs, or you deploying any API gateway. And this also relating to your opinion poll, even if some banks are not ready with their strategy yet, I'm sure once they do or take up such initiative, they will be forced to, because there will be questions from the other side. Okay, we will use, but what SLAs are they giving? And hence they have to get back to thinking, what are their performance practice or what strategy they have.
Thank you so much. In fact, that's a very relevant case, and we are seeing similar cases. In fact, that's why I mentioned earlier that performance engineering supporting the business competence is secondary. Performance engineering being competence for business is going to be a game changer, and we specifically work on some of these things. Like we have an API factory model, right? So we have some universal banks with an API stack. Some people just like APIs to have better, efficient internal communication. Forget about external also, right? And that's really blowing out. So having a sustainable working model for APIs separately is something interesting we saw happening, for which we are deploying now a lot of use cases. So, but thanks for sharing that. I'm going to quickly move in for interest of time to the next poll. The idea is that, and again, the thing you need to read into the question is that, do you see it as an absolute or a critical priority where business stakeholders are vocal about it? I'm sure it is, considering what happened in the last 1 year, but I'd like to hear that, it is, or is it just still project life cycle for performance engineering, or is it something that now is being considered as a continuous improvement life cycle throughout the year? So, Amol, have you spun the poll?
Yeah, it's on the screen.
Cool, thanks. So, well, hopefully, I'm interested to hear this. So again, just to reiterate, we're trying to, with performance engineering is omnipresent, right? You will definitely acknowledge it, but is it something that is now a consistent demand on an ongoing basis? That's I really be keen to hear, because I think that's something that really has moved up as a priority, is what we have seen.
We have almost 150 votes now. We'll give it 10 more seconds.
I think you can announce the trend if it changes dramatically. These are not questions, so it's okay.
Sure. So 60% of the respondents have said yes, while 40% have said said that sometimes it's project based.
Very interesting. So obviously, no was not going to be an answer we'd expect, but I see a very clear breakout in terms of people being more, persistent about performance, outcomes, and I think that's a great trend because I think vocalization about these things and questioning the normal. I think what Rohit said, I find it very relevant. Right, going ahead with the normal is something that used to happen, but now people are re-establishing the normal and vocalizing these things are very important. But Manish, again, I want to come back to you. If this is going to be the new normal and you're going to have people demanding ongoing performance, I'd like to start with you and then I'll go to the other panelists, including Rohit also. Actually, Rohit actually works on platforms. What are you seeing as the kind of bets people are taking on, or are they still just scaling the usual?
No, certainly this is in line with what we are seeing. I mean, I would not shy away from saying that, we have been in this performance engineering and tooling business for more than 2 decades now. So we're the leaders there. LoadRunner is a household name, I would say, when it comes to performance engineering. And a lot of the product strategy is being shaped by what our 4,000 plus customers are telling us. And this is exactly that it's going to, performance is moving beyond a project-based testing assignment to more of a performance engineering culture. And that's how our tooling has evolved from a point solution sitting on a desktop to now a pure platform, right? So your platform for performance engineering, which plugs into the entire development ecosystem, right? Right from the IDE to your CI tools, to cloud and containers, right? You want to burst load generators to the cloud. You want to orchestrate on a Kubernetes cluster. That's how the product is shaping up, because that's how plugged in it needs to be with the rest of the ecosystem, the technology ecosystem. The other thing from the technology side, which I also alluded to earlier, is the analytics piece. I think the data set is getting bigger and bigger. I mean, our biggest customer in India, and I might have mentioned this earlier to you, Amit, they test 300,000 concurrent user load. And this is probably the most scaling application. There is almost 1.5 crore users of that application, and half of them, almost 75 lakhs, they file their GST return on the last day of the every month, and that's one of the most scalable platforms. And the data points, remember, if you're running a 5-hour test on such a system, you're actually collecting millions of data points. So your analytics has to become more and more sophisticated. It's a big data problem. So the future of this platform is to bake in more AI and analytics based capabilities, which is something we've already publicized and we're working on it. And then, of course, I want to close by saying that there is this shift left trend, which means that performance has to start right with the development lifecycle. So as the sprints are getting over, or even with your nightly builds, you want to be able to run some load tests, maybe a smaller one, and do a trend analysis, with every build. Are you deteriorating the performance, or actually are you making it better? So the engineering responsibility with the developer does not just end by coding it, but coding it well. And that applies to security as well. We're already seeing that trend. So the developer responsible for security, developer is now also responsible for performance. So from a tooling strategy, the tool should also plug into the IDE, and that's where we're making some of the shifts in the tooling strategy.
Yeah, and I'll just, before Rohit, I'll come to you now after this, but just to add, one thing we saw as a very interesting trend, which we were trying to propagate for many years, was, journey-led performance. So sometimes you could have a cohort of systems working together, serving one journey. Could be, let's say, payments, could be customer onboarding. So clients are now demanding, and we are actually serving them with data-led performance engineering. So the evidence of data around their performance outcomes has become important, not because of their performance working or not, because that's the IP that they're trying to build back into their systems to be more responsive or have better knowledge about how their customers are getting impacted. So I think that is something absolutely in tandem as a trend that you see. So Rohit, for you, I think you are a core practitioner and you're a technologist, right? So you work on COTS, you work on open source, and then you build your own products, platforms also. So what are you seeing as a clear breakout trend here?
Yeah, I think to start with what I think what Manish has already projected, I think the biggest demand that from the tool strategy point of view that I think we need to meet is the shift left, right? I mean, like it's like infusing us to be into each and every cycle or iteration of development that we see. And how do we enable that? I think that is basically aligning whatever we think is a tool, kind of like um, being one medicine to all of them. So for that sake, I say something which is kind of understood by all different technology stacks. So for example, if I think from a solution that needs to assess monitoring strategy, right?
Yeah.
I can think of something that can understand JMX. And that means that if I have something else to play with, all I can do is like I can use Java plugins to still reuse that instead of using something like an agent which is kind of which varies between technology to technology. The second thing, obviously, I'm like to have a tool or strategy, I'm like which is kind of very active with respect to sensing what is happening as life, and that is where I think I really appreciate QualityKiosk for the say synthetic monitoring that they have come up with, right? Because nobody wants to miss the train. I'm like, if we have an issue, we want to triage it right away. Wow, one incident is always an opportunity. You don't want to miss the train and have another incident just to triage it, right?
Yeah.
And the wonderful thing, and I think which is kind of what everybody would agree with is, yes, I mean like something which is philosophically fit for SRE, fit for DevOps, fit for P, fit for Dev. So I think we need to have some tool which kinds of binds all of these, because I think each portfolio that we just name it across, it's all working towards performance engineering, which is to enhance the capability of performance, scalability, and reliability of a system. Simple example: IPv6, 2008, 2013, a grand milestone, right? And that is why it is quoted as one of the awakening philosophy of architectural world. Similarly, the concept of 2014, real-time DevOps, is the world that we are. We want the best practices, and we want that strategized through the right tooling. And when we have it, I think every problem would just be fun.
No, I think that command over your strategy around tooling is, I think, also an IP for the organizations that we see, especially startups, right? So startups are built around their command around the tooling strategy. Gaurav, just quickly, I wanted to just get your input specifically on the open source. How are you seeing it? Is it something that you are approaching it on a case-to-case basis, or there is a definite model around shifting some application life cycles using open source tooling, or do you see that still being currently not decisive?
Right. No, see, Amit, the organizations like us, we are largely dependent on COTS, right? We do little of our own development. So hence, open source for us is mostly a solve. Either I would say from a monitoring or diagnostic purposes, whatever tools are available, but not so much from application development, because we don't do that much of it. Having said that, I just sort of pick up on the question which Manish and Rohit also mentioned. If at all, I could sort of ask for where sort of more needs to happen, purely as a technology administrator, is I guess this whole use of analytics to better understand the data which is being generated, and also in a very visible way show where the bottlenecks are, and not just do that in a post facto basis by doing performance, but more like in a live and here and now basis. I guess that would be a massive desire, and I don't know where the tools and technology on that is. But to be able to see, if I'm running my systems right now, where are the bottlenecks, and leverage all the logs and all the tools which is available. So that is, I guess, what would be desired. The second thing which I'll just sort of add, and just sort of occurred from the previous question you have said, with this whole open APIs, and people are able to use something which is available by fintech, while it has given a lot of easier time to market. I guess, and Manish pointed it out that it's difficult to try it, but I guess the other issue which is added is this point about now you are responsible for a system for which you don't have complete control. Now,
Yeah.
if this third-party API which I'm using for getting my credit scores, or for getting some OCR done on a document, or even for understanding income assessment, if that is down, what site reliability or what availability can I guarantee? And I guess that is one thing which we have been looking at actively, is that while we want to
Yeah.
leverage these pieces, how can we still have redundancy even if it is on third party? So yeah.
No, complete that. That's something I can tell you. We are practically living by it right now, because as I told you, that customer journey-led engineering requires absolute mapping across the touch points. So if you take payments, probably out of the 18 odd hops, 5 are going to be with the issuer, and the 16 are outside, right? So you need to have equal visibility created, and some things like SV help you do that, creating your own local environment to an extent. But the others are that you have to create complete data-led visibility, including log side. So that is something I think companies are jumping on, and there are a lot of use cases that we have. We can discuss that separately, but I completely merit the point you're saying. That is the aim for most of the larger clients who are mobilizing resources, to have data led and performance engineering visibility, at least at a journey level to start with, because you cannot do an entire re-engineering, right, so to speak. So I think that is something that absolutely we see. I'd like to kind of curtail out to the last segment of the discussion. I'm sure we have more points to add, and we will try to add them as feasible, but I want to jump also to the Q&A that the audience has put up with us. Just wanted to kind of cycle through each. If you could just probably just give us a kind of a what is going to be the symphony that is going to allow you to do continuous performance assurance. It's the wrong typo there, and not just performance engineering at a project to project stagger, right? I think we talked about data, we talked about betting on certain environments like microservices, but if you could just individually say that, what is that one critical venture that you're doing right now to ensure continuous performance, or and if you're not, what is your current ambition? So Vivek, I could start with you, and we can just cycle through the other panelists, but if you can just help us
Sure.
understand, are you building this, and are you doing something interesting? We'd like to know.
Yeah, so we too are trying to do a good APM implementation wherein we can do or monitor the response times on a continuous basis, and to start with for the base systems or the CBS systems, and then come to the customer facing channels, because we believe that once the base is ready and good and response times are good, then most of the channels will be taken care. So we are trying to do a slightly reverse journey in that sense, but we believe that is something that will take us forward in a better way.
Okay, yeah, Gaurav.
I'll give a more philosophical answer, more what Rohit was initially mentioning. I guess this is more of a cultural thing. You need to understand performance engineering as the goal, not just for that team, but for the whole IT department per se, and if larger, because I guess that is the most important metric by which your output is being measured. So I guess if it is seen as a mission, I guess then it becomes a continuous thing versus project to project. थोड़ा ऊपर
Very nice.
level का है, but that's how I feel about it.
No, I'll give you at the end an example of this we experienced with the global, but it's very relevant. Bharat?
Yeah, for delivering continuous performance is to shift left. We have to do a shift left strategy for each and every project, and it's no longer it's not only with the tool set, it's with the mindset of the team. The development team. Development team is still what we are facing in our current organization with other client. The mindset is not changing. The developer wants to just develop and then just deliver it. They are not still not thinking in terms of performance engineering, performance, getting the benchmark and everything. So what we are doing in our current organization, we have created a framework where you just have to upload the scripts, and then you just have that particular framework will run with your nightly build or with every commit, and then give you end-to-end insights. It will not give you just just not give you the performance benchmark for that particular build. It will also compare with the previous build, and all the builds will be available. The benchmark will be available, and that for the load testing tool point of view. But not just load testing tool, but there are other aspects of the monitoring, like from application servers, the log analytics is there. We have also integrated that into that framework. Not only open source tool we are using it, the tools like load runner, microfocus, that is also being integrated in few clients, and then it is giving the build to build trend analysis. And it's just like when you're talking about faster time to market, and your projects are moving to cloud microservice architecture. So you are running a load test against an application which is containerized, but what about your load test? Is your load test is also containerized? So you have to also think in that space. So our current framework that we have developed is containerized in terms of uh, load generation, where the environment itself is spinned up. Load testing environment is spinned up during the test, and then it scale down itself. The saving cost for all the clients. Yeah.
No, I agree. So I think one part you are saying is that how to make it easy for a developer to consume the inflow of information, right? Because I think that is part of the job. And then, of course, making it more apparent so that it's less obvious to miss. I think that is something we definitely also agree. But Vivek, you are a developer from heart, right? So what are you doing now that you see? Because you are part of the problem as per him.
Yeah, that is true. So like I said, what we are trying to do is do annual review of most of our applications from a time to time. And obviously, before you release one, let's say app, we definitely do performance tuning, and we come up with some numbers saying, so many concurrency we will achieve. And on a regular basis, when you check the concurrency and when you see it is going to hit, the concurrency that is tested, then maybe do a second round, maybe it may be 3 6 months or whatever number of down the line. But that time we then redo this thing with slightly higher core, higher hardware, and trying to tune some of the indications that APM tools gives us. Saying maybe some queries are bad, maybe some functions are pathetically written by me or my team, and so on and so forth. Then correct those and then rerun the test. So I think unless it is done as a culture, as a regular activity, people will not see it as a long-term thing. Saying, yeah, it is consistently giving us a good performance. The mobile bank is never slow, or internet banking is not slow. The volumes by the partners or fintechs are consistently the same. That is, I think we should do.
Yeah, and I think spoken like a true developer, you gave very specific nuggets of activities. So I appreciate that. So Rohit, the panelists agree with the cultural. It's a moot point. You have to look at it as a cultural decision to be on top of this. Anything that you see otherwise that you're doing, or you would recommend people should do for this continuous CIP, continuous intelligence pipeline around performance?
Yeah, I mean, to add to it, I think we all agree. It's about realizing that yes, performance is our DNA, right? So that is one cultural thing that we want to have it. But what do we do beyond that? I think all of us who are here and many of us who are working in the industry, they understand the strategy like pipelining, say, performance testing, and monitoring. But that is kind of all very practical, right?
Yeah.
How do we ensure beyond that? Because I think if you think from the perspective, right, more often than not, teams might be doing things differently from the environment on which the real business is working, right? So there are a lot of ways to actually fuse the gap and ensure that everything works fine and everything is identifiable via the performance engineering engagement. But still, there will be a delta, right?
Yeah.
And I think delta is something that we need to talk about.
Yeah.
This implementation, I think everybody would do, and more or less it would be kind of synchronized with respect to how industry does it overall. But how to ensure that delta? I'll just give you a very, very brief example. I was working on I was working on a fine day, and I got pulled up for looking at severity on CBS, which is core banking system, right? And the bare minimum was like people were trying to do PE by redefining the objective and see what is the RCA underneath it. But I think that is where the delta is. Analyze the data at the time of incidents, right? So when the incident happens, if you look at the data, right, it tells you why it happened. And that is what I say is the delta and the insurance of performance engineering is how fast and how quick you are to assess the RCA. That is all performance engineering is about. Reacts that, say, bottleneck at the minimum course of time. And that is what, and that insurance comes with all these wonderful things that we're talking about, tools and aspects. But that delta thing is how much of engineering knowledge and how much of technology insurance knowledge that you have carried with us.
Yeah, I completely vouch for that for some projects I've seen where a lot of investment and talk was around data generation or data visualization, but we ended up actually working on data consumption. How do you consume the data? Right? How do you normalize it first and then consume it in meaningful sets, including live RCA feeds? So I think that's something I see that definitely being now tangible ask that we are seeing clients, but I would like to see more of that definitely in the projects we work on. Manish, anything you'd like to add from your perspective that you see uniquely happening besides what's been discussed?
Yeah, I mean, I think mentioned most of it earlier. So we are enabling the technology to support this, right? So there is a definite cultural change happening across leading, organizations. And I talked about how, and I think Bharat also talked about the need to shift left. It's getting into the hands of the developers and thereafter in the whole life cycle. So one of the things we did was we actually launched a developer edition of LoadRunner, which is actually free of cost. So every developer can go to our marketplace, use Google Micro Focus Marketplace, and every developer can download a copy that lets them run up to 50 users on their local machine, and it sits within the developer's IDE. But what's good about it is also that late stage performance engineering teams or people who still have to do a more end-to-end test on a full scale infrastructure, they can actually reuse those same assets that the developers are building in the developer edition of LoadRunner. They can be used in the full edition of LoadRunner in the platform later on. In fact, if the developer wants to burst the load beyond 50 users to say 5,000 users, they can just burst to our LoadRunner Cloud Edition, which is a pure SaaS-based, if they have the cloud credit. So all that is becoming more and more seamless to enable continuous performance. And then, of course, integration with the CI tools is almost mandatory today. So we enable that. And from a platform perspective, you also, like Bharat said, you want to containerize your load testing infrastructure, make it part of your CI/CD pipeline. All that is technology that's already very mature and stable from our stack. So yeah, we've continuously working to enable this.
Okay, so great. So I want to keep a time check. It's a performance. I don't want to have a poor performance on time. So we'll move on to the last poll. But one thing I'd like to just share as a case is, last year, QualityKiosk, in fact, we talked about culture, right? And Gaurav was saying philosophical. So I'll give you one input. For us, it became the largest deal that we ever did globally. It's with a large financial conglomerate, which is $500 billion in assets. And what they asked us was to actually set up the governance structure, right? That's called Digital Quality Office, right? That we set up for them. And we're doing it as a 5-year long-term contract. This specifically said that you manage the culture as a governance, right? And you will have KPIs around that. So it's very tangible also. And I think that is one consensus that we see is coming out from all the panelists. So really happy to hear that. Right, I want to conclude the last poll quickly. Amol, you can spin it. I'll just reiterate the question. So idea is that we talked about all this good stuff, right? But I do see one apparent handicap that was not talked about, but I do see it is that log kahan se milenge, right? Skill gap. Because some of the decisions you end up taking, and it's a natural decision, is on the curve of skill that you have. Right? Either it's tooling or your strategy, and so on and so forth. So it's an easy question. Is it right really dire for you? Yes, no, we are good, or do you see it happening in future? While I perceive a specific trend will come out towards one of the responses. So Amol, are we at least 100 responses already in?
Yes, 100 responses and still counting.
Yeah, so you can announce the trend. I think if there's a clear trend.
Sure. So we have 35% of the respondents, 55% of the respondents have said yes, while 21% have said no. 24% have said that they foresee this in future.
Okay, great. So I'll just say one thing. You should always perceive a skill gap, even if you have it. But I think the environment is so dynamic, the next curve is just around the corner. But I think the clear trend is that people do see it as a hurt point right now. I'd like to move on to the audience Q&A quickly. If we have time, panelists, are you okay? We are at 5:12. We were supposed to close at 5:15. We'll extend till 5:20. I hope that's okay. So first question quickly, and this is something as a topic I specifically avoided because I had actually seen the Q&A, was that around regulatory implications, right? I actually see this as the actual practical motivator. People are doing a lot of things, including putting money on the table to do things quickly. So what do you recommend that needs to be done differently if you or are you seeing anything on your space or domain? You recently had RBI send out circulars to a whole set of banks and financial institutions around performance, and a couple of them were reprimanded and in fact stopped from delivering some services. So anyone can answer on this if you want to pick up.
One of the things, Vivek here. One of the things, like I mentioned, I think everybody should start making it you can say the thing that we've been saying as a culture, and do this performance at least know where you are. You should at least know that you are able to support 100 user concurrency or 150 user or 500 user, whatever it is. But at least know your limitations, because once you know, only then you can do something to move from there. If you want to improve, you have to know where you are. And I think that is the prime thing that everybody should start doing.
Great. I think that's a relevant point. One thing I can just, any other panelists can also pitch in quickly, but I can recommend this. Sounds very simple, but I've not seen it really happen. Have a published performance audit. Very tough to do, actually. But so we are actually some of the owners of performance audits because we conduct it. We have discussions in closed rooms, but we also struggle to share it with everyone who needs to know at the right time, more importantly. So I think that is something which may become a practice due to regulatory norms also, because I think there is some RBI paper on this to publicly, and I think Rohit mentioned it, public de-ranking on performance is right now a practice with e-commerce portals, right? So on Amazon, you don't do enough transactions, you'll get de-ranked, right? They have a choice to do that. Something like that is going to get played out. I think that will become very interesting in this space. So just
to add to that, I'm like, because I see these circulars as well from RBI, and especially with respect to when we went to RBI live, right? There were mandatory norms that we had to obey in terms of like how the system was performing and what kind of capacity it had. I think it's needed, because I think because the money that is actually flowing in is people's money, and I think this money is just for the sake of experience that they want to have, right? Nobody wants to go to the bank nowadays. Everybody wants to stay back, and I think for this experience they're paying, and if they don't get this experience, then probably I think it's really a shame.
Yeah, I think that is only going to scale. In fact, coming to the next question, while I spell it out, is from a customer experience perspective. One discussion I was having with someone was around post-COVID, how people will leap out, and I said my worry is that people just would not want to leave their homes because they're getting things done. Worry about that, because habit gets formed, right? Because if you know now you can get things done within leaving the home, you might take comfort to that. So I think the next question kind of aligns with that. That now, is there any methodology for customer experience specific degradation? I think eKYC was mentioned. We have actually seen a lot of noise around that. Anything that any of the panelists have specifically done a specific methodology to engage on CX aside with the routine performance KPIs?
Yeah, Amit, if this question is around customer experience in terms of capturing the end user behavior, it's just about capturing each and every user traffic which is there in your application. So we have a lot of tools in markets, where you talk about App Dynamic, Dynatrace, New Relic, and for the APM point of view, for analytics, like you can use any other logging tools, log analyzer tools, or any other. Every major tool is capturing these metrics. The user agent metrics, it's capturing, and then we were creating kind of unified dashboards where this metrics will come up the screen and it will be visible to each and every stakeholders. So that's the customer experience from the front end side. Yeah.
So unifying dashboards could be a best practice. Anything specifically you saying that clients are doing smartly to be more ahead of the curve in terms of predicting where customers are failing? Anything as an example you saw?
Yeah, in terms of with the unified dashboard, they are picking out the customers which are like mobile based customers which are not performing well. So they are picking out these customers, and then they are finding out issues. If you talk about 2G, 3G, 4G, this particular bandwidth where the customer is struggling to get to the actual good response time. So the customer is expecting the same response time which a desktop user is having. So that you have to tune the application in such a way so that you'll get the same. You cannot change the end user's bandwidth. So you have to change the application. Yeah.
I have a question to the panelist, just following on to what Bharat said, and actually going back to the question is, so do you publish a CX score? That this is
so
the.
I'd like to add this,
Yeah,
I'd like to add this here, where Google has recently changed into a searching algorithm where your score the ranking score will change, based on your application's performance. So that practice you need to create in your organization, where you do a page speed insight, runs, and then capture this performance and then publish it within your organization, and it will be published by Google if you don't publish it.
Correct. So Google actually will be publishing it to the public outside. I was asking that internally, do any of you have a CX score that you can see that I'm out of 100 at a certain score for performance, or is it still linked data with CX outcomes? Anyone has that kind of an example, just out of curiosity?
No, to be honest, no. Even for the question, I don't think we also are doing anything. But what we intend to do, I can tell you, is just measure customer dropouts. Once somebody has started the journey, just try and see how many. Not all of it may be due to performance, but it is okay to assume that it is because of performance or the experience is bad, so that you can just try and see how much you can improve.
Yeah.
I would just to Vivek. I think it was very honest of him saying that through. But I think there is an experience. I think like we also do something. I'm like, see, I'm like, there are bound to be failures. In a payment strategy, there would be. But I think one audit that we all have to do, and I'm like, and I think we don't need to rely on APM tools for doing that, is to go via audit to understand what is, I mean, like how much of it is technical failure versus business failure. Because I think that is where the clear understanding is. Because I think if you just go by the virtue of APMs, then probably there could be some threshold that might be misfit and could error out for say wrong reasons. And the second thing is, I think I've seen it in the past, and it's a very hilarious incident. I'm like, we used to see, I'm like the traffic pattern via Google Analytics, and the traffic pattern used to say that people click on the products by the home page rather than coming via the search page. So it was a clear indication that people they were just livid in terms of using the search functionality that we had. And I think those are I think what the CX is about. CX is not about numbers or something. It's just the testimony of customers, what they think about you.
I think that's very true. I think one of the things we clearly see as a definite outcome is measuring the intangibles. We do that either through voice of customer or we do that through customer audits, which basically means that you have a great app, good performance, but if the customer says your app sucks, that's the benchmark you have to still answer to. So I think that intangible and how do you measure it, I think is definitely something that is in. I would like to just kind of conclude right now because we have another Q&A that I have, but I think we are out of time. But this question is specifically around vulnerabilities. If anyone wants to highlight an example, but I think the idea is that you're now having a more extended ecosystem, and I think some of the panelists did mention that your journey is not being concluded in your system. You're going through an API and completing it over a hop. So any best practice or if you've experienced any vulnerability like this that you have done to mitigate it, because as you extend and stretch your customer journey delivery model with third parties and across APIs, anything that you are experiencing, any panelist can just highlight that quickly. I'd be happy.
So, I mean, like this was my recommendation when I joined, and I think we also tend to work with multiple COTS product, right? And looking at how things back, right, especially with the payment areas. So what I have strategically done is like to assess a different set of say norm of doing a test in terms of understanding the reliability for the third party vendors. So what we basically do is like we basically alter the response average responses between the parties and see what kind of impact do we have on the system. Whether our, I mean, like because the key reason to do that is even if it takes ages for them to respond back, my system should not go down. So that is what the SLA I put forward to this kind of assessment, which has kind of like worked well for us because of the kind of system that we also a vendor platform.
Yeah, I think
to add to
Yeah,
that
please.
is just to have a mock services in place in your load testing in environment, and so that you have, and that should be dynamic, as Rohit said. It's not that you just get calling the third party and getting the response. So what is the SLA is configured and the different response and that's request and response.
That is an advertisement. That is an advertisement to QK as well because they are also into service virtualization.
Yeah, so I think we're into eventually, performance outcomes that matter to the clients. But one word I didn't hear, I'll just say it out, is keep a track on it. It will become more tangible. Is chaos engineering. I think what Rohit is saying is towards that, where you have multiple scenario randomly being investigated. Chaos engineering actually requires you to do that proactively, not wait for a scenario to get played out. And I think that is, it's tough to right now deploy it because of the code level architecture required. But I think chaos engineering is done by people like Uber, for example. So Uber basically has a nth level performance engineering stack wherein everything can fail, each component individually or each component collaboratively can fail, and still Uber will run. Okay, that's a different
example is Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix, exactly. So that's, but that's an extreme. It'll take time. There's a lot of development curve involved in this, but I think that's something to keep an eye on. This is for the audience also who asked the question. Good. I'm very happy. I think I had a good inputs. I now have a request to the audience before we conclude. We will be sharing a copy of this webinar. Please do go through it. Have any Q&As, come back to us, and please do circulate it to your practitioners who could not attend today. I think it's equally important to disseminate information and as well while we consume it. There's a feedback survey. Please respond. We would really happy to hear from you. There are some very basic questions and we'd like to understand who you are and what are your priorities. And if there's something that we can align in, we'd really be grateful to understand that. With that, I want to just conclude with a vote of thanks. All the panelists, I think you contributed tangibly and materially and also passionately to the event. And Manish, if you would like to add a vote of thanks to all the panelists as a joint partner to this event, that'll be great. Manish, can you hear me?
Manish, you may like to unmute yourself.
Okay, I think Manish may be preoccupied, but I would want to still conclude out, and I would extend the vote of thanks from his side also and Micro Focus team, along with QualityKiosk. We are passionate about this, right? Performance engineering is a practice, but more than that, it is actually an partnership that we work with clients on. At least the better clients we can work on. So we are really keen to have more discussions on these things. And I thank Vivek, Rohit, Gaurav, Bharat, and Manish, for making this practically feasible. And I look forward to more interactions. Again, please drop in the feedback survey. We'd love to hear from you. And we will share every respondent of the feedback survey a nugget of white paper from our side that they can go through that on a project, what use cases we have worked on, so that you can run through them and become familiar. So thank you again. I would, with that, Amol, you can conclude the broadcast, and we thank everyone and have a safe journey ahead for the foreseeable future. Thank you.